Ridgewood, Tennessee, was the kind of town where people vanished into routine, their lives dissolving into the rhythm of rain against rooftops and the hum of trucks passing through. Emma Carter was no different. At 32, she had perfected the art of being invisible. Every morning at 5, she unlocked the door of Rick's diner. Her brown apron tied tight around her waist, and her hair pulled back into a taut ponytail that kept the day's weight off her shoulders. Rick's diner was a relic of better days. Its once vibrant red booths had faded to a dull, peeling maroon, and the open 24 hours neon sign flickered with a tired hum. Emma had worked there for years, taking the early and late shifts, her hands moving in a dance of endless refills, greasy plates, and half-hearted smiles. She had her reasons. A tiny, one-room apartment above a rundown garage, the rent due in a week and no other source of income since her roommate skipped town. The place was barely more than a storage closet, with a single window that overlooked a trash-strewn alley and a leaking faucet that screeched every time it was turned. Smokey, her one-eyed tabby, was the only other soul that kept her company. Every night, he curled up beside her as she lay staring at the cracked ceiling, clutching a worn-out dog tag that once belonged to her grandfather. Emma's grandfather, Walter Carter, was a Korean War veteran, a man who wore his pride in silence. He'd taken her in after her parents disappeared into a haze of bad decisions and broken promises. Walter was a man of discipline, dignity, and small acts of honor that no one ever noticed. He taught Emma that honor wasn't something you shouted about. It's quiet, like sweeping the porch before the guests come. Even if they never show, he'd say, pipe smoke curling around his words. 3 years ago, Walter had passed away, leaving Emma with a few faded medals and that dog tag, a small, cold reminder of a man who'd given everything and received little in return. Since then, Emma had buried her grief beneath layers of silence and double shifts. She watched the world pass by from behind the counter at Rick's, observing the regulars with their coffee-stained mugs and tired eyes, memorizing the sound of the doorbell as people entered and left without ever looking at her. She had grown used to blending in with the wallpaper, to being just another fixture in a town where everyone was too busy trying to make it through the day to notice a waitress with quiet eyes and a tired smile. But Emma noticed everything. She noticed the truck driver who always asked for 2 slices of toast, but never touched the second slice, pocketing it for later. She noticed the teenage dishwasher, Troy, who showed up with fresh bruises on his arms every other week, but never said a word. And she especially noticed the ones who came in from the rain, dripping and shivering, eyes downcast, asking only for a cup of hot water and a place to sit for a moment. On that particular Tuesday evening, as the rain poured down in relentless sheets, the diner was nearly empty. The bell above the door jangled, and Emma turned, her rag still in hand, as a man stepped inside. He was soaked to the bone, his military green coat hanging in tattered folds around his thin frame. His beard was a mess of gray and white, his eyes bloodshot and hollow. The man limped as he moved, dragging one leg as though it weighed 1,000 pounds. Emma's heart tightened. The way he clutched a small paper bag to his chest, as if it were a lifeline, reminded her of her grandfather, of the way he'd held his dog Tag before slipping away in the hospital bed. The man stood by the door, scanning the room not for a seat, but for permission to exist. The other patrons turned away, eyes fixed on their coffee, pretending not to see him. Emma took a deep breath and stepped forward, her damp rag still clutched in her hand. "Evening," she said softly, her voice a fragile thread in the silence. "Can I get you something warm?" The man's gaze fell to the floor. His lips quivered. "Just a cup of hot water, ma'am," he said. "And maybe if you have some bread that's headed for the trash." Emma swallowed hard. The words echoed in her mind, a ghostly refrain from her grandfather's stories about nights spent in the Korean cold, hoping someone would spare a crust of bread. She nodded. "I'll see what I can do." Back in the kitchen, a plate of untouched chicken and dumplings sat under the heat lamp, a returned order that would soon be thrown away. Emma placed it carefully on a tray, adding an extra slice of buttered bread and a cup of hot coffee. She wrapped a cloth napkin around the silverware, making it look like any other meal. "Here you go," she said, setting the tray down in front of the man. "Still hot." The man looked up, his eyes wide with disbelief. "I can't pay." "Already paid for," Emma said, forcing a smile. "And the coffee's on me." The man's hands trembled as he picked up the fork. His eyes glistened. "You remind me of my wife," he said, his voice breaking. "She used to do things like this." Said everyone deserved warmth, especially those who'd lived through too much cold. Emma blinked back, tears nodding. "My grandfather said the same." Outside, the rain continued to pound against the glass, the world rushing by as if it had somewhere better to be. But in that moment, inside that faded diner, Emma and the man shared a quiet understanding. Two people, both carrying invisible wounds, finding a brief refuge in a simple, stolen moment of kindness. The rain continued to pour outside, a relentless cascade that mirrored the exhaustion settling into Emma's bones. Inside Rick's diner, the few remaining customers sipped their coffee in silence, their eyes darting nervously toward the old man huddled in the corner booth. Ethan Collins, that was the name he gave Emma when she quietly asked if he needed anything else. He ate slowly, as though each bite of chicken and dumplings required all his remaining strength. His left hand shook as he lifted the fork, and Emma noticed how his eyes drifted now and then to the steaming cup of coffee as if it were a lifeline. Wayne Parker, the diner's owner, stepped out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a greasy towel. He was a man in his 50s with a beer belly and a perpetual scowl. Wayne's gaze zeroed in on Ethan, then shifted to Emma, who was watching the old man eat with quiet concern. "Emma," Wayne barked, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Come here. Now." Emma straightened her back, bracing herself as she approached the counter. "Yes, Wayne." Wayne jabbed a thick finger toward Ethan. "What the hell is that man doing in here? I told you we don't serve beggars." Emma swallowed, her jaw tightening. "He just wanted some hot water and a piece of bread." "And you gave him a full meal?" Wayne's face reddened, a vein pulsing at his temple. "You think we're running a soup kitchen?" "It was a returned order," Emma said, her voice steady but firm. "It was going to be thrown away." Wayne slammed his fist against the counter, making the silverware clatter. "Not your call to make. I run this place, not you. You think giving out free meals makes you some kind of hero? You're fired. Get your things and get out." The words hit Emma like a slap. Around them, the other customers pretended not to hear, eyes fixed on their coffee cups, hands twitching with discomfort. No one spoke. No one stood up for her. Emma untied her apron with shaking hands and placed it on the counter. She glanced over her shoulder at Ethan, who was still holding the fork midair, his eyes filled with shame and guilt. "It's okay," Emma said to him, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Finish your meal." Without another word, Emma stepped outside. The rain hit her face like tiny, cold needles. Her thin jacket did little to keep the chill out, and her sneakers were soaked through in seconds. She tightened her grip on her bag, feeling the weight of her entire life inside. A few dollars, a change of clothes, and the dog tag Ethan had given her. From the alley beside the diner, Ethan emerged, moving slowly, his steps unsteady. He stopped a few feet away from Emma, his shoulders hunched against the cold. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice rasping. "I shouldn't have let you get in trouble for me." "You didn't do anything wrong," Emma said, her voice cracking. "I would have done it again." Ethan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, rusted dog tag. He pressed it into Emma's palm, closing her fingers around it. "You saved a soul tonight," he said hoarsely. "Maybe a broken one, but a soul nonetheless." Before Emma could respond, Ethan turned and hobbled away into the rain, his silhouette fading into the mist. Emma stood there, the dog tag warm in her hand despite the chill. Inside, Wayne watched her from the window, a satisfied sneer spreading across his face. Emma didn't cry. She couldn't afford to. There was no time for tears when the world was falling apart. The rain persisted into the night, a steady, drumming rhythm that echoed in Emma's mind as she walked aimlessly through Ridgewood. The few streetlights cast long, wavering shadows, and her soaked sneakers squelched with every step. In her hand, she clutched the dog tag Ethan had given her, its metal pressing a cold, sharp reminder against her skin. Her one-room apartment above the auto garage was dark when she finally arrived. Smokey meowed from the windowsill, his one eye glinting in the dim light. Emma dropped her bag by the door and sank onto the worn-out mattress. The room was frigid, the draft seeping through the cracked window. The faucet dripped incessantly, each drop amplifying the emptiness around her. She reached for her phone, but there were no new messages, no missed calls. Emma's fingers shook as she refreshed her bank account. $42.13. Not even enough for a full week's groceries. She set the phone down and buried her face in her hands. "You're okay," she whispered to herself, the words a hollow echo in the empty room. "You're still okay." Across town, Rick's diner remained brightly lit, its open 24 hours sign flickering as Wayne Parker counted the night's earnings. The bell above the door jingled as the last customer left, and Wayne locked up, whistling to himself. The cash register clinked as he shut it, a smug smile playing on his lips. He'd shown Emma her place, and as far as he was concerned, that was the end of it. But for Emma, it was just the beginning. The next morning, she rose early, slipping into the only clean clothes she had left, a faded hoodie and jeans still damp from the night before. Smokey watched her as she tied her hair back, his gaze a silent, steady witness. "Be good, buddy," Emma said, forcing a smile as she set a small dish of tuna in front of him, the last of her stash from the diner's break room. She tucked Ethan's dog tag into her pocket, its weight a constant reminder, and stepped outside into the damp, gray morning. Emma spent hours walking the streets of Ridgewood, stopping at every diner, cafe, and convenience store she could find. "Are you hiring?" she asked each time, her voice growing hoarser with every rejection. "We can't risk the attention, honey," said the manager at the corner cafe, sliding her application back without even looking at it. Nothing personal. At Tony's Grill, the cook glanced at her, eyes narrowing. "Aren't you that girl from Rick's? The one who gave free meals to bums?" "Yeah, we don't need that kind of trouble." By mid-afternoon, Emma's legs ached, and her stomach twisted with hunger. She leaned against the wall outside a gas station, her breath visible in the chill air. From across the street, she spotted a familiar figure huddled beneath a bus shelter. Ethan. His coat was even more ragged than the night before, the cuffs frayed and filthy. He held the same paper bag, now nearly soaked through, cradling it like a fragile relic. Emma crossed the street, her sneakers splashing through puddles. "Ethan," she called softly. The old man's head jerked up, his eyes wide and unfocused. For a moment, he seemed not to recognize her. Then his gaze fell to the dog tag glinting in her hand, and his expression softened. "Hey there, soldier," Emma said, trying to keep her voice light. "Still hanging in there?" Ethan coughed, a wet, rattling sound. "Trying," he rasped. "Don't know how much longer." Emma reached into her bag and pulled out half of a stale sandwich she'd taken from a food pantry earlier that morning. "Here," she said, handing it to him. "It's not much, but—" Ethan's hands trembled as he accepted the food. "Thank you," he whispered, his eyes falling to the dog tag once more. "You kept it." "You asked me to," Emma said. "And I keep my promises." A tear slipped down Ethan's cheek, and he quickly wiped it away, his gaze darting to the street as if searching for something or someone. Before Emma could ask what he was looking for, a black SUV pulled up to the curb. The door opened, and a man in a military uniform stepped out. His eyes scanned the street before landing on Emma and Ethan. "Ethan Collins?" the man called, his voice firm but not unkind. Ethan stiffened, his jaw clenched. Emma stepped closer, her heart pounding. The man approached, his face hard and stern. "I'm looking for my father." The SUV door slammed shut, and the man in the military uniform stepped forward. His presence commanded attention. Broad shoulders, sharp jawline, eyes as steely as the rain-soaked pavement beneath his boots. Emma's gaze flicked to Ethan, whose face had drained of color. "Daniel?" Ethan rasped, his voice cracking. "What are you doing here?" The man's expression softened slightly. "Dad," he said, and in that single word was a world of unspoken grief and relief. He moved closer, but Ethan shrank back, clutching the damp paper bag to his chest. Emma watched, feeling like an intruder, yet unable to tear her eyes away. "Dad, I've been looking for you for months," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "After Mom passed, you just disappeared." Ethan shook his head, his jaw tight. "I didn't want to be found." "You needed help," Daniel insisted. I should have done more." Emma's heart clenched as she listened, the tension between father and son palpable. Daniel ran a hand over his military cap, his knuckles white. "I was on a base in Colorado when they told me you'd been spotted here. I couldn't believe it." Ethan's gaze dropped to the ground, and his shoulders sagged. "I'm fine," he muttered. "I don't need your pity." "It's not pity," Daniel said, his tone firm. "It's love." Silence fell heavy between them, the kind of silence that only years of distance and unspoken words could create. Emma stood by, the dog tag warm in her pocket. Finally, Daniel turned to Emma, his eyes softening. "Are you the one who's been helping him?" Emma swallowed. "I just gave him some food," she said. "It wasn't much." "You did more than you know," Daniel said, his gaze steady. "Thank you." Before Emma could respond, a cough racked Ethan's body, bending him over with the force of it. Emma stepped forward instinctively, her hand hovering near his back, but Daniel was already there, wrapping an arm around his father. "Dad, you're coming with me," Daniel said, his voice gentle but resolute. "There's a VA clinic a few towns over. They can help." Ethan shook his head violently. "No," he said, his eyes blazing with sudden fury. "I don't need any handouts. I don't need their help. They don't care about us. They never did." Daniel's jaw clenched, and he shot a glance at Emma, as if seeking backup. But Emma was frozen, torn between the raw pain in Ethan's eyes and the desperate concern in Daniel's. "Dad, please," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "You saved my life once. Let me save yours." Ethan closed his eyes, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Rain continued to pour, washing over them as though trying to cleanse the years of hurt and missed chances. Finally, Ethan nodded, the fight draining from his body like air from a deflating balloon. "All right," he whispered, his eyes fixed on the ground. "All right." Daniel let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for years. "Thank you," he said, his hand tightening on his father's shoulder. Emma watched them as they moved toward the SUV, Daniel supporting Ethan's unsteady steps. Just before he climbed inside, Ethan turned back, his eyes meeting Emma's. "Thank you," he said, his voice low and thick with emotion. "For everything." Emma nodded, her throat tight, her fingers curling around the dog tag in her pocket. The SUV pulled away, the taillights disappearing into the mist, and Emma was left standing alone in the rain, the chill seeping into her bones. For a moment, the world felt unbearably silent. Then a car horn blared, a bus screeched to a halt, and Ridgewood resumed its indifference. Emma turned away, her head bowed, her heart heavy. The weight of Ethan's dog tag pressed against her palm, a cold, silent reminder of the battles fought and the wounds that never truly healed. The VA clinic was a few towns over, a gray, imposing building with walls that seemed to echo with the weight of countless untold stories. Inside, Daniel paced the hallway outside Ethan's room, his military boots clicking against the linoleum floor. Nurses passed by with sympathetic glances, but Daniel couldn't bring himself to meet their eyes. Inside the room, Ethan lay on a cot, his body frail against the starched white sheets. The steady beep of the heart monitor punctuated the silence, each beat a reminder that he was still here, still holding on. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow. On the bedside table sat the paper bag he had clung to so desperately, now wrinkled and empty. Emma stood by the window, arms crossed over her chest, watching the rain streak down the glass. The room smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee, the kind they served in foam cups down the hall. Daniel's reflection appeared beside hers in the glass. "You didn't have to come," he said, his voice low. Emma shook her head. "I owed him that much." Daniel sighed, rubbing a hand over the back of his neck. "I don't know how to reach him. It's like he's not really here anymore." "He's here," Emma said, glancing back at Ethan's still form. "He's just lost." Daniel's jaw tightened. He wasn't always like this. Before Mom died, he was different. He used to laugh. Used to tell stories about his days in the service. He was a hero, you know? Saved a whole convoy in Iraq. Pulled 3 men out of a burning vehicle. That's how he got his leg injury. "And the Silver Star," Emma added softly. Daniel's eyes darkened. "Yeah. The medal he pawned to buy food." Emma swallowed. The weight of the dog tag heavy in her pocket. "I think he just needs to know he still matters," she said. "That someone still sees him." Daniel nodded, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I haven't seen him in over a year. The last time we spoke, we fought. I told him he was a coward for giving up, for letting life beat him down." "And what did he say?" Emma asked. Daniel's jaw clenched. He said, "You don't know what it's like to come back and feel like a ghost." And then he hung up. A heavy silence fell over the room. Emma shifted uncomfortably, feeling the weight of Ethan's absence as if it were a physical thing pressing down on them. Suddenly, a low, rasping voice broke through the silence. "Daniel?" Both Emma and Daniel turned sharply. Ethan's eyes were open, his gaze fixed on the ceiling. Daniel rushed to his side, dropping to one knee. "Dad, I'm here." Ethan's gaze drifted to Emma, then back to Daniel. "Didn't mean to cause trouble," he whispered, his voice thin and weak. "You didn't cause trouble," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved my life once, Dad. Now, let me help you." Ethan's eyes fluttered closed. "Just tired. So tired." Emma stepped forward, her hand reaching for Ethan's. "You're not alone, Ethan," she said. "You're not invisible." Ethan's fingers twitched, the faintest squeeze against her hand. Then, as if the effort had drained the last of his strength, he slipped back into unconsciousness. Daniel lowered his head, pressing a hand to his father's chest as if to anchor him here, in this moment, in this life. Emma stayed beside them, her hand resting on Ethan's, her heart breaking for all the words left unsaid. Outside, the rain continued to fall, each drop a whispered prayer for a man who had given everything and received so little in return. The morning sun cast a golden hue over Ridgefield, illuminating the town with a warmth that had long been absent. Emma stood outside the newly renovated community kitchen, the sign above reading "The Hearth, a place for all." The building, once a dilapidated warehouse, now buzzed with life and purpose. Inside, the aroma of freshly baked bread mingled with the scent of brewing coffee. Volunteers moved with practiced ease, setting tables, stirring pots, and welcoming guests with genuine smiles. The kitchen had become more than just a place to eat. It was a sanctuary, a testament to the resilience of a community that had chosen compassion over indifference. Emma walked through the bustling room, her eyes scanning the faces of those who had found solace within these walls. Veterans shared stories over meals, children laughed as they helped set tables, and neighbors who had once been strangers now greeted each other like old friends. In one corner, a group gathered around a man demonstrating how to prepare a hearty stew. His hands moved deftly, chopping vegetables and seasoning the pot with a confidence that spoke of years of experience. As he looked up, his eyes met Emma's, and a smile spread across his face. "Emma," he called out, waving her over. "Come taste this. I think I finally got the seasoning right." She approached, accepting the offered spoon. The flavors danced on her tongue, rich and comforting. "It's perfect, Daniel," she said, nodding in approval. Daniel chuckled, wiping his hands on a towel. "I've been learning from the best," he said, gesturing to the group around him. "These folks have taught me more about cooking and life than I ever imagined." Emma smiled, her heart swelling with pride. Daniel had not only found his father, but had also discovered a new purpose. Together, they had turned their shared pain into a mission to help others. At the back of the room, Ethan sat at a table, a steaming bowl of soup before him. His posture was more upright now, his eyes clearer. He engaged in animated conversation with a young man, their laughter echoing through the room. Emma approached, placing a gentle hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. He looked up, his face lighting up with a smile. "Of course, Emma. Always." She sat down, taking a moment to absorb the scene around her. The transformation was remarkable, not just in the building but in the people. The community had rallied together, turning a moment of injustice into a movement of kindness. Ethan reached into his pocket, pulling out a small, worn object. He held it out to Emma. "I want you to have this," he said. She looked down to see his dog tag, the metal cool against her skin. "I can't accept this," she protested. "It's yours." He shook his head. "It's ours. A reminder of what we've built together." Tears welled in Emma's eyes as she clasped the tag in her hand. "Thank you," she whispered. As the day progressed, the kitchen continued to fill with laughter, stories, and the clinking of dishes. The hearth had become a beacon of hope, a place where everyone was welcome and no one was forgotten. Outside, the sun continued its ascent, casting a warm glow over Ridgefield. The town had changed, not through grand gestures, but through small acts of kindness that had rippled outward, touching lives and healing wounds. Emma stood at the doorway, watching as people came and went, each carrying with them a piece of the community they had helped create. She knew there would still be challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long while, she felt hopeful. The hearth was more than a kitchen. It was a testament to the power of compassion, a reminder that even in the darkest times, a single act of kindness could ignite a flame that would light the way forward. And as the sun set, casting long shadows over the town, that flame burned brightly, a symbol of resilience, unity, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. The sun cast a warm glow over Ridgefield as Emma stood at the entrance of the hearth, the community kitchen that had become a beacon of hope for many. The once quiet town now buzzed with renewed energy, its residents inspired by the transformation that had taken place. Inside, the aroma of freshly baked bread and simmering soups filled the air. Volunteers moved with purpose, serving meals and sharing stories with those who walked through the doors. The walls, adorned with photographs and handwritten notes, told tales of resilience, kindness, and unity. Emma walked through the bustling room, her eyes scanning the faces of those who had found solace within these walls. Veterans shared laughter with teenagers, single mothers exchanged recipes with retirees, and children played in a corner designated just for them. The hearth had become more than a kitchen. It was a sanctuary. In one corner, Daniel stood beside his father, Ethan, both engaged in a lively conversation with a group of young volunteers. Ethan's eyes sparkled with a vitality that had been absent for years. His posture was more upright, his voice steady. The transformation was evident, not just in him, but in the community that had rallied around him. Emma approached them, a smile spreading across her face. "Looks like you're becoming quite the celebrity," she teased Ethan. He chuckled, the sound rich and genuine. "Just sharing a few stories," he replied. "These young folks have a lot to teach us, too." Daniel nodded in agreement. "It's amazing how much we can learn from each other when we take the time to listen." As the day progressed, more people filtered in. Some came for a hot meal, others for companionship. The hearth welcomed them all, no questions asked. The atmosphere was one of acceptance, understanding, and mutual respect. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emma sat with Ethan and Daniel, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. "It's incredible to see how far we've come," she mused. "From a single act of kindness to this thriving community." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "It's a reminder that even the smallest actions can have profound impacts," Daniel added, "and that when we stand together, we can create meaningful change." Outside, The town of Ridgefield continued to evolve, inspired by the transformation within the hearth. The community kitchen had ignited a movement, one that emphasized compassion, unity, and the power of collective action. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Emma looked around the room, filled with laughter, warmth, and hope. She knew that this was just the beginning. The ripple of change that had started here would continue to spread, touching lives far beyond the walls of the hearth. And in that moment, surrounded by friends and newfound family, she felt a profound sense of gratitude and purpose. The journey had not been easy, but it had been worth every step. Together, they had built something beautiful, a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit. Emma stood at the threshold of the hearth as dusk settled over Ridgewood. The kitchen glowed warm and golden against the evening sky. Through the windows she saw families and volunteers inside, setting tables, ladling soup, sharing laughter. A soft breeze carried the aroma of baked bread and stew down the street. Emma closed her eyes, letting the friendly voices and gentle clatter of dishes wrap around her like a comforting song. Inside, Ethan Collins stood at a large pot, slowly stirring chicken and dumplings. His once weary face was brightened by a humble smile. He wore a clean flannel shirt under an old army jacket Daniel had given him, proudly bearing his unit's patch. Each thank you from someone coming back for seconds made his chest swell with quiet pride. For the first time in years, he stood a little taller. The burden he'd carried so long had lightened in the warmth of this place. Daniel Collins had traded his uniform for rolled-up sleeves and a hearth apron. He served alongside his father and the other veterans, here not as a colonel but as a son. At one point, Ethan caught Daniel's eye. They exchanged a gentle smile that spoke 1,000 words. Daniel blinked back a sting of tears and gave Ethan a small nod. One soldier to another, one son to his father. Emma stepped inside, heart swelling at the scene. Not long ago, this had been only a quiet dream. She remembered first seeing Ethan, hungry and alone outside the diner where she once worked. Everyone else saw a drifter in tattered clothes. Emma, recalling her grandfather's teachings, saw a man deserving of dignity. True honor is silent, he always told her. Do what's right, even if no one notices. Those words guided her when she handed Ethan a warm meal that fateful day, setting off a wave of kindness that changed their lives. Tonight, the hearth brimmed with community and second chances. Neighbors who once hurried past homeless strangers now sat beside them, sharing food and hope. A local baker served slices of donated pie, while a group of teenagers laughed at Ethan's playful boot camp stories. People of all ages and walks of life connected in ways they never had before. Later, Daniel tapped a spoon against a mug to get everyone's attention. Conversations hushed. "Thank you all for being here," he said, voice thick with emotion. "The hearth is more than a kitchen. It's a family, one built on compassion." He looked to Emma and Ethan, standing arm in arm. "This began because one waitress helped a hungry veteran, my father. Emma's small act of courage changed my dad's life, and mine. She gave me back my father." A warm murmur rippled through the crowd. Ethan lowered his eyes, gently squeezing Emma's hand. A tear slid down her cheek as she smiled. Then a small voice spoke up. Little Mary Fletcher, hand in her mother's, stepped forward holding something. She offered Ethan a single red geranium in a tiny pot, its bloom bright against her hands. "Mr. Ethan," she said earnestly, "this is for you. You remind me of my grandpa, and he always said red flowers mean thank you and love." Ethan knelt, his hands trembling as he accepted the gift. His eyes brimmed with tears. "Thank you, sweetheart," he choked out. From his pocket, he drew a tarnished medal and pressed it into Mary's palm. "I want you to have this. It stands for bravery and kindness, like you." Mary's eyes widened. Then she flung her arms around his neck. The crowd collectively exhaled. Sniffles and smiles spread, and not one eye stayed dry. As the night wound down, volunteers tidied up and stacked chairs. Emma switched off the lights one by one until only a single lantern in the window remained, its flame a small, steady beacon. Daniel helped his father outside. The autumn air was cool, and the stars were brilliant above the quiet street. The hearth's warm glow spilled onto the sidewalk where they stood. Ethan cradled the geranium like a treasure. Daniel put an arm around his dad's shoulders. For a moment, they simply listened to crickets and rustling leaves. Emma gazed at father and son reunited under the Tennessee moon. In the silence, she heard her grandfather's voice, "Do what's right, even when no one's watching." She never expected a reward for living that way, but tonight she knew there was one. Dignity restored and love renewed. Ethan turned to Emma, eyes shining. "You gave me more than a meal," he said softly. "You gave me back my family." Emma wiped away a tear. "It was all of us," she murmured. "This whole community." Daniel's voice was rough as he added, "Thank you." Then he straightened and snapped a crisp salute. Ethan stood as tall as he could and returned it. Their eyes met, Daniel's respectful, Ethan's proud. Emma's heart overflowed, watching this silent honor pass between them. The three shared a final embrace, as Emma locked the hearth and headed home under the canopy of stars. She felt not the weight of silent honor, but its warmth. She knew that dignity and compassion lived in every small act of courage, each capable of kindling the brightest flame. Ridgewood would remember this night. One humble act had lifted the whole town. Emma never sought recognition, but she was the heart of the hearth, and her quiet courage was inspiring others to care. In the end, the weight of silent honor was not a burden at all. It was a beacon. Emma glanced back at the hearth's gentle glow one last time and whispered a thank you to her grandfather and to the night. In that moment, she knew her one small brave act had become a legacy of love, one that would warm hearts for years to come.